All right, and I'm going to put the chat back on. So if you have a question or something, I'm going to try to keep one eye on this screen with the chat and the other eye on this screen um, with our topic, which is engineering analysis, results, and reports. All right, so let's get going on this. And I'm going to go in and do a little bit of review from last week. And I feel like I didn't do a great job. We had a lot of introductory information on just kind of what Synergi is for, what it does, really broad stuff. And when we get into model loading and saving, there's a lot of technique there. So I want to spend a little bit of time just looking at how you load and save models in Synergi here. So I've got Synergi up, and usually when you have a new install of Synergi and you start up Synergi, you're going to get this sample model here that shows up automatically. Now, many of you may have a part of your own system that comes up automatically, or Synergi just comes up blank with nothing in it. And so, you know, my presentation last week is probably left you in a void there because you've got nothing on your screen. So to load a model, if we just focus on using access databases, then it's you just hit the little load button up here. And if you've loaded models in the past, you're going to get this list of data source aliases. And so these are just names that are associated with paths, database providers, username, you know, your credentials, things like that are all bundled up into this thing called a data source alias. And so you can pick from that list. And if it's the first time you're loading a database, you can hit the browse button down here, these little 3 dots. You can click on that, and then we can go in and grab a model here, and then click on open. And then in my case, even though I went and used the browse buttons, Synergi recognizes that I've loaded that model before. And so it found the DSA in this list and highlighted it. So it's not going to create another DSA. It's just going to use the same one that I already have for that particular database. And that's nice because certainly in my case, I've got hundreds of these things. And for you, you might have a lot of them also. So it's nice not to create new ones unnecessarily. So we get this and we go to, well, let's look at these options here. We've got a feeder list and we've got a feeder tree. And then there's some other options in here. Check data is just a run through looking at all sorts of potential data problems and presenting that in a report form. And you can go ahead and load the model and run check data later. And most of check data gets run every time you run an analysis anyway. Hopefully I'll remember to show you that when we run an analysis, where you can find that in the reports. And this option down here just loads the warehouse at the same time. It's just saving you some extra steps. And you know, no, actually I forgot that was even in here. That's kind of nice because a lot of times with us sitting here on the Synergi Electric side of things, we get models from you all, and it's convenient if that model has the model and the warehouse saved to a single access database, because it's one file you can send. Now, for most of you, it's a good practice to have your warehouse in a standalone database that's separate, and then all your models are in one or multiple databases off over here. So you're going to have a warehouse and you're going to have a model. They're 2 separate things. So this bottom option would not be something you would use. But even if you do that sort of thing, there's a lot of times you're going to do studies, and maybe you're saying, all right, we're going to study the situation, this customer, whatever it is, and I've got the model, and I grab the warehouse from wherever the warehouse is stored, and I'm going to save that all in one bundle. And that way I can tuck it away when the study is done and I've got it, I can come back to it. So anyway, that's what that bottom option's for. So these top 2 are kind of interesting though. I'm going to go ahead and check them both. So we've got a feeder list and a feeder tree. And if I go to next here, it's a little redundant here. This is the feeder tree first, and there's a whole lot of stuff, controls and things in here, built primarily for folks that have enterprise databases and thousands of feeders in a single model. This is a way that you can look at this thing from the region, the planning area, the substation, and then within the substation there's transformers and then feeders down in here. And so you can pick and choose the feeders that you want to load from this list here. We'll talk about this stuff down the road when we get into contingency analysis. But this is a feeder tree, and I can pick feeders from this. And then if I go to next, there's a feeder list here. And you can see the two feeders that I selected from that list here. So, you know, I've shown you both of these. You're probably not going to want to do them both all the time. So you're probably either going to want the feeder list or the feeder tree, but not both. It doesn't hurt if you do have them both. There's not a problem with that. Just some extra pages to step through. Oh, forgot what I was going to say here. Sorry. So when you get here to next, it's going to load these in. And at this point, the feeders that I selected are loaded into memory, but they're kind of off over here. So you've got the model in one spot. We're seeing it on the screen. And then these feeders that I've loaded are sitting over here, and they've not been merged together. So it shows me what I've loaded, and it shows me any sort of problems. And I mentioned this last week. Sometimes you'll get messages in here, warnings about duplicate nodes, so that if I load feeders and they connect to the feeders that I already have in memory, I'm going to get messages that there's duplicate nodes being loaded. And that makes sense because these are connection points, right? The nodes are shared between the two feeders. I'm loading in duplicate data, and the data that's already in Synergi is going to be kept. The stuff that's being loaded is not going to be used if there are duplicates. But you can look at all this, and what I can do is I can just go back if I don't like what I see. So because I didn't merge it in, I can go all the way back to the beginning of this thing and do it again. And also, if I go in here and see if I can kind of back out of this. Now, if you don't select anything, so I don't pick any feeders from this list, no selection at all, then when I go to next, it's going to load the entire database only if it's access or a file-based, a binary file, text file, something like that. It's going to load the whole thing. And so if you are using access databases, you're probably, that's what you're going to do all the time. You're just going to load the whole thing. So if I'm going to cancel this and don't do the merge here. So a lot of times you just go in and say load. You're going to grab your pick your DSA and then just go to next and just skip all the way through this thing. And got some sort of data issue here, but you're just not even going to pay attention to the feeder selection because you're just going to load the whole database all the time. Okay, so that's a little bit on loading models. And then to save models, it's just backwards. We talked about DSAs a lot last week, but a common approach if you're saving to access is you hit the browse button, and then I think I've got a spot here for us. So I can give this thing a name of right. So I give this a name. And so I haven't done anything with DSAs. I've just hit the browse button and I'm typing in a file name for this access database. And I say open. And now here's where I get my DSA. It's going to default to my file name. A lot of times just use the same thing, but you can change this and give you something maybe more meaningful inside of Synergi. So then I'll say OK here and save. And I'm going to create the database. Okay, so this is going to save the entire model that I have in memory to that access database. And this is transmission-ish stuff. I think I stumbled on this a lot last week. I've got to get to the bottom of it, but it's in the transmission model that we have in our sample model. So I doubt any of you would see this, and we'll get it fixed. All right, so that's how you save. Now then, how do we merge things together? So if I've got this model here, and maybe I want to load a substation or some feeders that I don't have in memory. So we pretty much did that a minute ago. So you go in and load, you pick your DSA, and you go through your feeder list and pick the feeders you want to load. You load them in, and then you just continue on. So I've got a couple of substations here. If I load another substation, now I've got 3 substations. And then if I want to save that entire set of things, then I just go to save, just like I did. And I can point to the same database here that I just saved, and I can save into it. So if I click on save now, it's going to be updating that database that I just created. And it's going to have the 3 substations in it, or whatever. I can load more feeders, more subs. I can keep saving to that target database if I want to. And so that's how you can accumulate feeders into your model and continue to save it to create a bigger saved model. Now then, if I want to save a model that only has some of these feeders, then what we have to do is select feeders, which is going to be the next thing we're going to look at. So when you load a model, you've got feeders and substations that you have selected to display, and there could be a whole bunch of stuff that's not selected, and that's sitting in the background in Synergi. It's not going to be analyzed, but it's going to be it's in there's the model, and you can select those feeders when you need to, and we'll go into that in just a bit here. But when you do a save, go in here to save, and right here is where you have selected feeders. And this is going to only save the feeders that are visible, that are selected in the display. So I've got these 2 substations here. Maybe there's 4 other substations that aren't selected. If I choose save all feeders, then everything, whether it's selected or not selected, is going to get saved. If I do this step, it's only going to save what I've selected. And this is pretty rare that you're going to do this because, well, it's going to be, splitting up your model. You do this if you want to take a model and divide it into different portions in different databases. And so it's not very common to do that sort of thing. But anyway, this is how you do it. You're going to get some prompts there. I'm not going to go into it, but hopefully that makes sense. You're going to, usually it's going to be creating a new database. And if you are saving selected feeders into an existing database, there's deletes that are done to clear out that existing database. And so you have to pay attention to that. But that's the step that you would use to do it. So a couple of other things real quick, because we got a lot to do on the display and the analysis and all that. There's sometimes you'll load a model, or you'll save a model into an existing database, and you're going to get a bunch of warnings about missing fields. And that occurs because you have a newer version of Synergi. This is 6.14 right here. So maybe I'm saving models with 6.14, and then a few months from now, we've got version 6.16. And I go to save a model into one of these databases, and I'm going to get warnings that there's missing fields. And that's because the newer version of Synergi has new fields in the database. So to put those fields into an old database, you go to this check right here. It used to be called check and repair, but we don't have a lot of space on these ribbon bars, so it's just called check. And if you open it up, you can see there's a model database check and repair. And so you click on that, you select a database like this, and you just go to next. And you can see a whole bunch of things here. It's going to add missing tables and fields, which is what we want. And then there's some other stuff. You should just be able to just take everything checked. It's stuff that all of these things are fixing data problems, values that shouldn't, sometimes you end up with zeros in the database and they shouldn't be zeros. So capacity factor, for example, you wouldn't want to, if it's a zero, that is very likely a data issue. You wouldn't want a capacity factor set to zero. I guess it's plausible, but I don't know why. So these are all kind of tools in here to just correct really bad data problems. And so that's why you probably don't need to read through here and study these. Just run check data, hit finish, and then it's going to give you a prompt here. Do you want to continue? And then it shows you all the SQL that was run. You can copy this if you want to send it to somebody, or I'm not sure, but you can copy these. I think the reason the copy is here is sometimes IT folks want to run this themselves, and so you can send it along and then commit when we're done. There's also a check and repair for the data for the warehouse. So those two things are there. Last piece here before we get into this week's topic is the case files right here. So remember, we've got the warehouse, which is kind of represented by the warehouse tab, all this data, conductor nameplate data, transformer nameplate, all sorts of nameplate stuff. That's usually going to be in one database. And then you've got the model, you know, the instances of sections and regulators, reclosers, all that. It's usually going to be in a separate model. If it's a model that you load a lot, this is just a shortcut. And so once you have loaded your model, so step one is going to be load your model, load your warehouse, and you know the warehouse is right here, loading and saving, works just like the model, loading and saving. You got your model loaded, your warehouse loaded, and by the way, you can hover down here over this text on the bottom that has your the DSA, the latest DSA, and you can see the paths to these. And so you can see I've got a warehouse loaded, I've got a model loaded. The case file over here, the way this works is you can come in here and you type in a name, and then you click the little plus sign. And now what Synergi does is it creates a little macro file. It's just a text file. And if we go and look at this in the editor, I'm going to click this edit button right here. This is, I'm going to open it up in Notepad. We have a really powerful editor in Synergi, but it looks intimidating, doesn't it? So I'm going to open this up in Notepad instead, just so it's not as complex looking. So when I typed in training example and hit that plus sign, this file was created. So you can see the name of the file is trainingexample.syncase. And then this is a macro here, and it's just saying to drop the feeders, drop the warehouse, and then here's all the stuff I want to load, the DSAs for loading, and then I want to select. So it's and then I'm even going to zoom to a location in here. So here's coordinates that I want to zoom to. And so that's convenient because I can easily go in here and here's something reg test model. That's probably something small. Complete. There we go. So that's a so I can load this model, and if I want, I can go back to this training example that I just saved the case for and hit that right arrow and then load that. So the case files are just a quick way that you can jump from one model to the other. And when you load a case file, you should be able to go and do a save on that, and it should have the correct DSA highlighted here. But don't ignore this. You know, give it a sanity check. You know, look at this and make sure that if you do save, you're saving to the right DSA. It should be good. Okay, now let's talk about selecting feeders. So I've loaded this model here, and now I want to select feeders. These days, the tool that I use nearly exclusively is just right-clicking on sections. So all of these all these feeders in the substation come in, and by the way, there's an option on the feeder and the substation editor that says load it I think it's display when loaded. I think that's the name of it. And it's that checkbox that determines if a feeder or a sub is selected when you load the model, if you're wondering. So in our sample model, there's a lot of other feeders and subs that don't show up, and that's because that checkbox is turned off for them. So to select feeders, I go in here if I'm doing analysis and I want to just focus on this feeder only, for example, I right click on it, and then up here on the top of the context menu under select feeders, there's a bunch of choices. And so I can select only this feeder. And there we go. So now I've got just that one feeder that I can look at. And then if I want to go back to what I had before, then I go back to, I click on a blank area out here, and then feeder selection previous, and that brings it all back. And there's other options on that also. So select feeders, select the feeder in the substation. So it's going to give you the feeder and the sub, but it may not be the other feeders on that sub. So the big one is I want the sub and all feeders. And so that is, yes, so let me go back to previous. That's not a good example here, isn't it? Up here, we've got 2 feeders per sub. That one was just 1 feeder per sub, so it's not too exciting. Select sub and all feeders. There we go. So I've got the 2 feeders, and I've got the substation in here. So the feeders connected, breakers, bus bar, substation. There's a transformer right there. So that's using that tool is just super convenient. And you can go in here after the fact, and then it should be a queue, so that you should be able to go to this previous and back out. If you've done selections and selections, you can do previous and iterate back through those. Sometimes I'll tell you it hiccups a bit. So if it does hiccup and you want to manually select feeders, then you can right click on a blank area and do select feeders right here, or you can click F2, and then up here on the ribbon bar, model, the model tab right here, select feeders. So any of those 3 things give you this dialog box. And then this is a list of all the feeders in memory. So you can see when we loaded the sample, these ones that are checked are displayed, and then all this stuff is not displayed. And so if you want to if you want to analyze a feeder or not, you just hit these check boxes. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here that's hopefully intuitive. One thing that I guess we kind of innovated this, it's not terribly intuitive, I guess, until you use it, but if you want to get a bunch of feeders that belong to a substation, the way to do that is to click these headers up here and sort by substation. And then you can go down and you can see the substation name here. Click on the first one, then go to the last feeder in the substation, hold down Shift, which is, Windows. That's a common Windows gesture. And then that's going to select everything here. And then you can either check them all. So I want to select them all, or I want to deselect them maybe if I want to exclude that substation. Or this thing right here is going to toggle selected or not selected. And so that's what those are. Yeah, okay, so that's what those are. And then this button right here just selects everything in the list. So, and you'll see this set of buttons in other places in List and Synergi. It's a pretty good set, and it's been going strong for 20-something years, so we'll keep using that. All right, I'm going to cancel out of here. I think you can figure the select feeders stuff out. Now then, let's run an analysis, and that's pretty straightforward. Up on the ribbon bar, analysis, and we'll run load flow. And get my list here. I want to stay on track. All right, so load flow runs, and we've got this report. And I think all the applications have reports. This one's probably the longest report with the most details, of course, because it's just so important. And there's so many different things to look at with load flow. But there's these summaries up here, and with the summaries, we are trying to make them short. Years and years ago, back in the Scott and Scott days, you would run a load flow back then with a product called DPAG, and when you ran that, you would get the output would be this type of thing, just tons of numbers, and it's just so hard to comprehend that, to digest this kind of thing. So that's why we really focus a lot on summaries, and we shy away from super long lists of numbers. So we're trying to, what is the important thing for us to understand about these substations after we run a load flow. So that's what we're trying to get at here. And there's exceptions in this list. We're going to talk about these down the road, but these are going to be over voltages, overloads, imbalance problems, reverse power flow, things like that. And it happens that these are all zeros for our sample model, but when you start to see exceptions in this list, there'll be a chapter here, continuous and emergency exceptions, that you can get all the details in. But if you all have advice on things that we can take out of this or put into this, we're always kind of massaging these reports, trying to make them better. And so you can see lots of summaries here, and then we can get down into the facilities. It's a little drop down here, and then there's stuff like conductors, which is, I think, kind of intriguing. If you have older feeders, if you're looking at reconductoring or just looking at conductor performance, you can see miles of conductor, things like loss and voltage drop, stuff like that. And then we've got a chapter on renewables, a lot of stuff going on with renewables. Different sorts of loads here we'll talk about later, and protected devices. And so this is a long list, right? So if I want to just look at fuses, you can come up into this little edit box and you can put in a filter, like I was going to stop with so FUS, and then now we've got just fuses here. And so then we can look across here. You can sort these columns. So if I want to get fuses with the most customer flow, I can double click on that heading to get this list. Kind of sorted the way with what I want in the order that I want. These things you can click on open in Excel up here. And there it is. It's always a surprise where it shows up. And so the contents of that report that are formatted are going to show up in Excel here. And I'm going to show you some other ways to get numbers out of Synergi. Depending on what you're doing, you probably want to go that route, but you can get these reports into Excel to maybe make your own charts or something like that. This right here, this light bulb, is a very important tool because you can use it to turn off report generation, so that as you run things like fault analysis, load flow, all these things, you don't have reports piling up or getting in front of you. And it also has if you right click on this, a lot of you may not know this, that there's a close all reports here. And so that's nice because it closes them. So if I run load flow, I'm just going to run it a few times here. And so that's kind of the annoying thing about having reports on is if I'm really focused on this map and trying to figure out what's going on here, every time I run that load flow, then I'm distracted. And maybe subconsciously it's not a big deal. All right, but it's breaking my train of thought. And so that's why I like to keep the reports off unless I know that I need something in those reports. You'll see this little running person up here, and that's a rerun analysis. And that's going to, whatever it was that you just ran, you can click on that and it's going to run it again. And so we get another report here. And I think if I click rerun here, it's going to replace this report. Yeah. So if I have the report I'm on the report tab and I click rerun, it's going to update these results, or it's really replacing these results with the new report. So that's what the rerun is. Now then, how are we doing? Model tab, output over here. And this is something that you all will probably want to do. And I would do it, but I do web presentations all the time. And so this is not good for a single screen. So if you're on a laptop with no external monitors, you probably don't want to do this. But if you go into this dockable reports, so it's a model tab, output button, and you go down and then select dockable reports there. Now if I go and I run load flow, then I've got a separate window. This thing here has my load flow report. And if I'm going to run load flow again, so you can see tabs get created here, so I can have all my reports kind of stack up on this. And then down here are open in Excel and printing and all that kind of stuff is down here on these little controls. So if you've got dual screens, which most of you do, then this is nice because you can have this off to the side. And it's the best of both worlds because now you've got the report there. You can look at that with your left or right eye, and then you can keep your other eye on the map here and not be distracted by that. So I'm going to switch mine back to turn off dockable reports, close that thing. So that's in there, and a nice feature. So I've ran load flow. Let's look at all the different ways that we can see what the results are. And the most common, of course, is just to double click on a section. And section editor comes up here. We'll, as we go through these sessions, we'll talk about a lot of stuff on the section editor. This is all the data, model data. But down here on the results tab, this is what we're interested in. So these are results. Most of this stuff is going to come out of load flow. That's why these numbers are all populated in here. So that's my latest load flow results are going to be in this list. It's up to you to update. Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, Glenn, that's a yeah, it's a tough one to tie. So if analysis doesn't converge, it could be a lot of reasons for that, and I'll write that down and try to get to that as we proceed through here. But the iteration count is an important one. But and if you have a model that doesn't converge, and you can certainly send it to us, and we can help troubleshoot it. So the results in this list here. You can collapse these things, and if you click around among sections, then this results tab stays visible. You can see that my section that I'm looking at changes, but the results tab is up. And so this is an effective way to just kind of explore values, explore results in the model. And even if you click on here's a recloser, I click on that, it's still going to be the results tab. But the contents are going to be a bit different because it's a recloser. So you can click from one device to another and look at results that way. Up here, let's see here. Up here, this R, you can turn off groups of things that you don't want to see. So go down here. So if I scroll down here, I've got reliability down here at the bottom. We're not running reliability, so I can disable that group. If I turn off reliability, uncheck that, then I don't have it in my list anymore. So it kind of declutters. Maybe you're not doing anything with faults, you could turn that off. But don't forget that this is here, because what I'll do is I'll turn things off and then I forget about it. And so it's kind of back to that subconscious thing where I'm evaluating, I'm looking at stuff, and there could be some useful information that I just don't see because I've deactivated it here. Reliability is pretty straightforward, but things like capacity, that's loading levels, things like that, you can shut off here in this list. All right, so section results. And then back on the editor here, there's info tabs on all of the facilities, lines, and all the devices have this info tab. They don't all have information in them yet, but we're doing a lot more with this. And it's just a useful place to put in really detail-y stuff. So this line section here, you can see the impedance matrices, all this stuff for this particular line section. So we get into something like a recloser. I think we have the curve information in there, the database ID for curves. So this is over here. It's really not calculation results, but it is stuff that's generated after the analysis runs. And so depending on what type of device it is, it could be some useful stuff. And okay, yeah, let me see if I can see that. Just looking at this file sharing log. Oh, okay, yeah. So a person on the chat was asking about this file sharing lock. Count exceed. Yeah, this is a common one. And what this is an access. I'm going to say problem. It's a limit with access that it's only going to allow so many file locks to be open at once. And I don't know much about how access works, but to fix this problem, you have to go into, let me see if I can find it here real quick. Support tab. So this is a very specific thing. So if you're brand new to Synergi, you can kind of get a flavor for how this works here on the support tab. Maintenance wizard right here. There is a checkbox. Set max locks equal to 100,000. And then I can click on finish. It should be fine. You can see this. Some of these things, it's going to restart Synergi. This one will not. And it goes into the registry and into the access areas and sets this max locks limit to 100,000. And it should do that for all the different access drivers. There's about 3 or 4 access drivers that you could potentially be using with Synergi. So this is going to update them all. If you don't have admin rights, this is probably not going to work. You're probably going to have to call and either have an IT person come over and run it. The IT person can set this directly. I think the install guide for Synergi Electric has more details on in the registry entry for this. Or maybe the IT person can just give you access rights for a little bit. You can run this, and then you should be better off. So with the file sharing locks. All right, so we looked at results on the results editor and the info tabs. Now then, we're going to get more serious here about looking at results. A fairly new tool in Synergi, this was a client suggestion, is a results box. So if you right click on a section, you get this on the context menu is results box, and you can click on that. And then here we've got values for volts and amps. And this drop down is different categories. So if we wanted to look at loading levels, we can do that. So this is nice. You can bring up results boxes and these results boxes are going to stay fixed on your window. So see, they don't move when your model moves. So you do have to keep up with what they belong to. And a leader line would be awesome here. It's a big deal in the Windows world because of the context of where this thing sits in the Windows world as with respect to this line here. So trying to draw a line from this all the way down to that would be rough to do. But intuitively, yeah, it'd be great to have a leader line. These things are really nice though. I use them all the time because you can just look at values. I'm in here doing a study, focused on all this stuff. I can see my results boxes. And if you have, when you bring up a new results box, it's going to use, this is going to be the same value as the last results box. But you can go in, and if I want to look at something like fault levels, then I can click this equal sign, and it's going to make them all fault levels. And you can hover around these buttons, and there's a lot of little tools in here, and you can close individual results boxes or close them all with this. If we're in here looking at this area, maybe we've got a customer problem, voltage, something like that, and I want to say, all right, what's going on with the feeder and the substation? If I move my mouse along over this section, on the status bar down here, I can see it's feeder New Liberty on the bottom of the screen. So I can go here to New Liberty, and I can right click on this over on the warehouse, sorry, not the warehouse, on the Explorer, on the Model Explorer, and I can click results box here. And so now I've got the feeder results box, and I didn't have to pan over to the feeder. I can have this information right here immediately, and that's super handy to be able to bring up these results boxes. Another way that you can show results is to right click on a section and go to, text labels right here, text label. And I'm going to go to quick fault right there. So these quick ones are all canned. They're all kind of pre-designed. So I do quick fault, and it shows up on the map. And I can see my fault levels in here, my source impedance. And the nice thing about those is that they are going to stay in the location where you put them. Yeah, so I right clicked on this section, it stuck it up here. So if you want to move these, you need to click on the top row. That's how you move. If you click on the bottom part, it doesn't work. You've got to do the very top row, and then you see it highlights the section that it belongs to. So you can get those positions. And as the map moves around, the text goes with it. Whereas remember, these don't. And so, these are really handy for that. When you put the quick ones on, these are not going to get saved if you save the model. So if you double click it though, there's all sorts of stuff you can do. You can kind of go in here and explore and see how you can configure your own text label. You can pick results and put in text and units and all sorts of stuff here. But right here is store in database. So if you do want to make that text label permanent, you can click on that and then apply it. And so now if I save this model and load it back, I'm going to have a text label right here. So that's text labels, super useful. Then the next thing for results is over here on the results tab. And let me see if I can, I'm going to find a folder here, and then we're going to take a look at what happens when yeah, so this is my output folder for Synergi Electric. Now yours may be in your user area. Last week we talked about the preferences, and there's a paths folder in there that you can use to configure your paths. I keep mine out on directly on my drive, so I can get at it. And so there's all these files in here. So we've been running Synergi, so I've got all these files sitting in here. And okay, so let's do this. Take just a second here, just to demonstrate here. I'm going to close Synergi. And so all those files are sitting in here. These are all results files, reports, all that kind of thing are sitting in here. Now then I'm going to launch Synergi. Let's see if I can keep this thing on top here. So when I start Synergi up, there we go. So all those files are gone. We get a few. These are required for Synergi to run the mapping stuff. And then these are images that we use for Google Earth when we put icons and stuff in Google Earth. So all those reports and results are gone. And so whenever you restart Synergi, the output folder gets washed out. Everything gets deleted out of there, and you're starting from a clean folder. Now then, I'm going to go in and see if I can. I'm going to slide this over. I'm going to run load flow. So here's that folder, and I'm going to go in here and run load flow analysis. All right, so we see a bunch of files sitting in here now, and these are all the reports. So because I have reports showing, all these are kept in files so that we can show these reports quickly and have all these sorts of tools for data processing and all that within the reports. And then these BRF files, there's binary results files. So makes me smile, because when I was a kid, you know, it was the big word was barf. You see that word all the time, and Mad Magazine was always awesome to pick up, and so it's not the best extension, I think, for these files, but it certainly brings back memories. The left side of these files is a description. It's a load flow analysis, and then what kind of stuff is in that load flow file. So I'm showing you how high tech we are here. Synergi Electric is a tool built by engineers for engineers. So we're going to come up with a a good way to get the job done, and I'm proud of it. I think it's simple, works really well. So these files get generated when load flow is run, and so on the results tab of Synergi, you can see all these names. It's just the left side of these BRF files are listed out here. So if I go into, here's imbalance, and it's not going to do me any good to do anything with this in Windows, but in Synergi, it knows what that is, and I can, if I expand it, then Synergi goes to that file, and at the top of the file is a little table of contents about what's in that file. And then if I pick on something, then we're going to run through that binary file and grab all the results and associate those results to the model. So so I click on that. Now my map is colored by results, and these are imbalanced results. So now I've got my map colored, and you want to use this floating legend here. So that little pie right there toggles the floating legend on and off. And this is really a crucial tool for understanding what we've got displayed on the map. So we can see the intervals. So my voltage imbalance from 1.2 to 1 is red, and that's where I've got most of the imbalance in the model. Well, how big of a deal is it? Well, it's a pretty small percentage of my substations. You know, so what is that? It's probably less than 10%. And so you can see what these intervals are. I can see the majority of it sitting up here. Sometimes you get zero values, and you don't want to see these, because a lot of stuff, if it's zero, it doesn't matter. It's a kind of a don't care. And that's what this little button right here does: hide zero values. And so that's going to take all the sections that had an imbalance of 0, and see that's this big old slice here, and that's out of range color. And you can see them on the map also. So it's also kind of a quick way to show all the 0 values. So that's what that does. There are, this R here gives you some very common results. So there's, I don't know, well over 1,000 results that could come out from all the different applications in Synergi. And these are ones that we feel are just commonly used. So it's just a quick way to get to those results. This button right here is useful because sometimes you want a higher number to be red. So imbalance, red makes sense. If I'm going to go in and color by voltage, then I'll go to, let's go to load flow balanced and go to minimum volts. So coloring by minimum voltage now. Well, now I'm looking for problems that are going to be low voltage problems. So I'm going to click that little up and down arrow there, and it's going to flip the colors around. And so now red is going to be what I'm concerned about. So it's, it's a subconscious thing again, I think, but I think that helps a lot. If we're comfortable, familiar, the stuff that we're thinking about and doing, then that's helpful. So it's just a quick flick of that button up there. The rest of this stuff, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over this interval locking thing. But the hamburger here is what you use along with that to set your own intervals on here. And a warning to, if you use this, and you should use it, there's lots of times where you want to set your own intervals and lock it in place. Don't forget that you have it set, because if you go back, if I lock these intervals in for voltages with my own ranges, and then I go back and look at percent loading, then everything is going to be, well below these values, because I'm going to be, loadings are going to be in the 20, 30, 60% ranges, and my customized intervals are going to be above that. So remember that you might want to turn that off to do auto intervals. And so PV hosting capacity is definitely you're going to use this stuff a lot, I think, for that. And this is a reason why I don't use reports a whole lot, because you can come in here, you can color and see the trends for things. So here's my let's look at balanced values are going to be averages. If it's vector values, they're going to be vector averages. Everything in Synergi runs by phase. So detailed analysis, but we're trying to present information in something that's more consolidated. So my percent loading is going to be an average. It may be the maximum of any, it is, I'm sorry, the maximum of any phase. And so here's my loading levels. All right, so I am going to run out of time here, but we'll pick it up. We're decent shape here, but all right, floating legend. Now then, so we're looking at these results. We've got our map colored, and this is where if I see something going on with this feeder, I might, what I showed you earlier, I might go in and select only this feeder, that sort of thing. But if I want to see results on this section, I can bring up a text label. Remember, that's a right click, text label. You can do a quick basic is the load flow, and I don't know why we don't call it quick load flow, but there we go. So I can voltage, current, power, and also on these, if you double click the text label, you get the settings here. Something like power. I'm not. There's definitely times where you need biphase power. A lot of times I'm just looking at the total, so I can uncheck that biphase. So I've got total power. Probably want to do that for amps, and then maybe I do want biphase voltage. So you can go in and fiddle with these. And in 6.14, this update, there's a default. You can establish a default for this so that you don't have to do it every single time. But okay, so text labels, results boxes. Remember, that's here. Bring up results box. Now then, annotation. I want to show values on every single section, and we'll come back in and review this next week, because there's some important stuff I just didn't get to. So annotation. If you've been using Synergi for years and years, you're going to be in the habit of bringing up display settings, and don't do that for results. What you want to do is come over here to the results set. Again, whatever you're interested in. So let's stick with balanced, and I want to look at, how about the minimum voltage. So I'm going to click on that, color by minimum voltage, and then if you do a right click, right here we've got annotate 1, 2, and 3. And so these are, every section has 3 pieces of annotation, results annotation that can be shown. You can also have section name, section description. You can have some text for the section, and then along with that, you can have 3 results values showing. So I'm going to take volt minimum, and this is where I'm telling Synergi which slot I want it in. So if I click on that, now I can see my results, and it's oftentimes cluttery if you've got a dense model. So you zoom in here more. So now I can see my voltage. And then how about power flow into? So I go right click on this one and put that into slot 2. That's my power flow value. And how about reserve amps? This is how much current I have available to add to that section or somewhere downstream, and I'll put that into slot 3. So there's my reserve amps. So I've got these 3 values now, and if I want to know what these are, you can bring up the legend, and the text right here, it is really pale, so might be hard to see on the web, but right here are results values, and there's also a legend over here that shows these result values, so you can remind yourself about what they are. Now then, turning them off and on is going to be done on the display ribbon. And we'll talk about other stuff in here. Yeah, sorry, it's going to be next week. But right here is the control for that. And the 1 pound, 2 pound, 3 pound, that was the approach we had a while back, and it's redundant with what we've just done here. But if I want to set what was 3 was reserve amps. So how about if we something like a kVAR into? So if you right click on kVAR into to color by that, then right here, this 3 pound is going to set the results slot. So this is kVAR into now. You can see the text up here is updated. So these days, you really don't need to use these buttons because you're just going to go in and just do a context menu. And how far is it from the source? Miles from source. You right click on that and then annotate 3, and it shows you, so it's going to set the value. So I don't know, we'll probably take out this column, but these 3 are important because if you just want to not see that 3rd value anymore, you can hit the checkbox and it's going to turn it off. So you can turn the slots off and on with these checkboxes, and that is a big deal. Because if you just don't want to see a ton of numbers if you don't need to. And then there's overriding controls. That's all the results on and off and stuff like that. Got 1 minute left, and so we're going to pick up here next week since we didn't get through all of this. But these slots are not necessarily biphase, right? These are values that I chose. So if we go to results detail, load flow detail right here, then we do have biphase values. So what I can do is if I want to see phase A, B, and C, I can do annotate 1. That's not a good thing. I'm sorry, it's right here under detail. That's strange how that, so I can right click on that, annotate 2. Huh. That's a bug. I'm on a pretty good clip for finding bugs during our training here. It's weird how that opens up this. And I shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to quickly go down here and just click, right click on each of these to add them to my list here. So I'm going to investigate what's up with that. So now I got voltage on on phase A, B, and C. So that's great for 3-phase lines like this. I can see my biphase voltage values. Here it's not so good. And to deal with this, there's a setting in the display settings that we'll look at, and we'll do that next week since we're out of time here. But you have to tell Synergi that these are biphase values, and if I have a section like this this is a phase A section, it doesn't have a phase B or C. So in this situation, don't show a phase that doesn't exist. So you have to make that setting in the display settings, because sometimes these are not biphase values, and you always want to show all three regardless of the phasing of the section. So that's where we'll get into that next week. All right, I'm a minute over, and thanks for joining me this afternoon. Hope this was useful to you, and we'll have the video posted. If you have questions or things that you'd like to see in Synergi, then please let us know. Ideas, problems, things that are confusing, and we'll definitely pay attention to that.